The rain had started sometime in the late afternoon, a slow, steady drizzle that blurred the city lights and left the air hanging heavy with the scent of wet concrete and wilting roses. Lena didn't notice at first. She was too tired, her legs aching from 12 hours of being on her feet, her shoulders slumped under the quiet weight that had become her new normal. The hospital lounge had offered only lukewarm coffee and the kind of silence that makes your own thoughts feel too loud. She'd packed her weekend bag in hope. Maybe she'd sleep in, maybe catch up on laundry. Maybe things at home would feel ... Better dot, she turned onto the familiar street, lined with overgrown hedges and cracked sidewalks, and something in her stomach shifted. Her parents' house stood still, lights dimmed, curtains drawn oddly composed like it was holding its breath. She noticed the mailbox stuffed with letters and the porch swept clean, but her usual parking space was empty. Someone else was already there. Still, she didn't think anything of it. Not really, until her key didn't fit the lock. She tried again, once, twice. Same dull refusal. She bent down, examined the lock. New, shiny, installed recently ... Then came the voice. Lena. Her mother called from behind the door. No greeting, no warmth, just her name, wrapped in formality. Leave your house keys. You're not welcome here anymore. Lena froze. Rain slid down her face like tears she hadn't given permission to fall. She stepped back from the door, gripping her suitcase like an anchor. What? Her voice cracked. Mom, what are you talking about? There was no reply. Only the sound of muffled movement inside her father's heavy steps. Her brother's indistinct voice, too far away to decipher. Not one of them came. To the door, not one explanation, no goodbye, just silence. Thick, final ... Her mouth went dry. Can you please tell me what's going on? A pause. Then from the other side, you need to go. The suitcase handle dug into her palm. She looked down at her keys still warm from her pocket, and something inside her snapped. Not in anger, but in stunned detachment, like watching a movie. Scene where the main character hasn't realized the tragedy yet. She walked around the side of the house and reached through the window where the screen had always been loose. Her fingers brushed the living room mantel. She placed the keys down slowly, precisely, the way someone lays down flowers at a grave. That was how it felt. Like something had died. She walked back to her car, sat inside for what could have been minutes or hours, the rain making halos on the windshield. Her phone buzzed with a message from a coworker, something mundane about a missed chart. She couldn't answer. She couldn't even breathe properly. The air had gotten thick with the kind of grief that doesn't fit into words. She drove to a motel 20 minutes away, hands numb on the wheel, eyes dry but stinging. She didn't cry that night. She stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was temporary, a mistake, a misunderstanding. Surely someone would call and explain. No one did. 2 days later, the phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't pick. Up. Hello, is this Lena Whitmore? Yes, this is Marianne calling from First National Mortgage. We're just following up on the property at 211 Fairview Lane. We've received notice that your name has been removed from the title, and we're contacting you to confirm whether the cosigner intends to continue payments. Lena sat up. Her heart thudded once, then sank like a stone. What did you say? Her voice was barely audible. The title on the home was refinanced last quarter, and your name was removed from the deed. We just want to confirm you were aware of this and whether you're responsible for the remaining balance, or if we should speak to the current signatory. Lena's world tilted, her breath caught. She hadn't signed anything. No documents, no meeting, no conversation. She hadn't even known a refinance was happening. I don't understand, she said. I didn't authorize that. I co-signed that mortgage. That's my home. A silence on the line. Then the woman spoke again, slower this time. I recommend you contact our legal department immediately, Miss Whitmore. This might be a matter of concern. Lena hung up, the motel walls pressing in on her. Her pulse raced, cold sweat prickling her spine. It wasn't just about being kicked out. This wasn't just abandonment. They hadn't just exiled her. They had erased her. I was 21 when I gave up my first apartment. It was a tiny studio above a Thai restaurant with creaky floorboards and water that smelled faintly of rust, but it was mine. I had a desk by the window, a thrifted velvet chair, and the kind of quiet that made you feel like maybe, just maybe, you were finally becoming your own person. My parents didn't understand. Why waste money on rent? My mother had asked, eyebrows arched as if logic itself was offended. Stay here, save. You can focus on nursing school and help out a little at home. It was framed like a blessing, a gift. A return to the nest. And so I came back, folded myself into the rhythm of the household, like a sheet pressed too tightly into the corners of a bed. It started small, doing the dishes, folding laundry, making dinner on Tuesdays. But somehow, Tuesday became every night. Somehow, errands became expectations. Somehow, I was waking at 5 a.m. to help prep breakfast before my shift incoming. Home to a mother who'd sigh at how tired I looked, as if fatigue were a moral failing. I told myself it was temporary. That's how love works. That's what good daughters do. When my mother got sick the following winter, I paused my program. Just a semester, I thought, just until she's stable. She cried when I offered, held my face in both hands like I was some rare jewel, and whispered, "You're my angel." But angels don't have boundaries. And I learned that the hard way. My brother, Aaron, had already long flown the nest by then, chasing one doomed startup after another, always coming home with a new idea, a new excuse, a new scar on his ego. My parents adored him. He's ambitious, they'd say. He's just trying to make it work. I was the one who made things work. I kept the lights on. I filled the fridge. I covered gaps in bills with my nursing income and clipped coupons, while Aaron bought sneakers he couldn't afford and played video games all night in the room that used to be my quiet reading space. When our father retired and said we needed to refinance the house, I didn't hesitate. "It'll be easier with your income on the paperwork," he said. "Just a formality." I remember the way he smiled, so calm, so practiced, as he slid the documents across the kitchen table. My mother was pouring coffee. Aaron was humming in the background. The house smelled like burnt toast and lemon furniture polish. It all felt so domestic. I signed. I didn't read the fine print. I didn't ask questions. I trusted them, and just like that, my name was on the deed. My credit, my income, my future, all tied to that house. The home where I had given up time, energy, ambition. The home I believed was part of me. It wasn't. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things shifted. My mother began to correct everything I did, how I folded towels, how I cut vegetables, how I dressed for work. "A nurse shouldn't wear lipstick like that," she'd mutter. "It makes you look tired." She started calling me moody, sensitive, as if the constant disapproval was something I conjured in my own head. Aaron moved back in permanently after one particularly messy business failure. My parents never questioned it. They gave him space, made him tea, defended him when collectors called. He just needs support. My mother said I watched her cradle his failure like it was a child, while she weaponized my reliability. I paid more. I did more. And still, I became less. They stopped asking me things. Conversations happened behind closed doors. Plans were made without my input. I'd walk into the kitchen to silence or sudden subject changes. And yet, I kept pouring the tea. I kept showing up because I told myself that love was a verb, not a feeling. And I was doing the verbs, wiping down counters, picking up prescriptions, driving my father to his checkups. I told myself that loyalty was noble, that patience would pay off, that I was part of something larger than myself. I ignored the part of me that was slowly fading. I became background noise in my own life, a shadow flitting between appointments and dinner tables, always present, rarely seen. The scent of lavender detergent clung to my scrubs. My mother's perfume, powdery, expensive, hung in the hallways long after she passed by, like she was leaving her mark on the very air dot. Sometimes I'd walk into my room and find something moved. A drawer left open, a document misplaced. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself they respected me, but respect is quiet. And absence speaks. The day I heard them laughing in the kitchen, laughing about me, I stood outside the doorway and realized something hollow and cold was blooming in my chest. My father had said something about how dramatic Lena can be, and Erin had followed with, "She thinks she owns the place just because she signed a few papers." They didn't know I was listening, and maybe that's the problem. I was always listening, always watching, always waiting for the love I was told I had earned, but I wasn't a daughter. I was a placeholder, a convenience, and still I stayed. Because where else was there to go? The house was mine, I told myself. It held my childhood, my dreams, my silence. I didn't know then that they'd already found a way to take it from me, and I had signed the permission slip with my own name. The air in the mortgage office smelled like laminate and dust, sterile and different. Lena stood at the counter, trying to keep her voice steady while her fingers trembled over the edge of her purse. The woman behind the desk wore glasses too, big for her face and a name tag that said Ruth. She looked tired but kind. Lena clung to that kindness like a frayed rope. I just thought, I don't understand. "This is my address," she said, sliding the envelope from the mortgage company across. "The counter. I've lived there my whole life," I co-signed. "And now you're saying my name isn't on it?" Ruth clicked through her computer with slow, deliberate taps. Lena could see the blue of the screen reflecting off her lenses. This might take a minute, Ruth murmured. The seconds stretched. Then Ruth frowned. "Looks like the property was refinanced last spring," she said. "Different lender. The title was updated." "You're not listed anymore." Lena blinked. There must be a mistake." "I never signed anything to be removed." Ruth turned the monitor gently. "Here's the release form. Says you signed." In April, Lena leaned in. Her own name was scrawled at the bottom of a form she had never seen before. A shaky imitation of her signature, like someone trying to forge the essence of her. "That's not me," she said, voice small and cracking. Ruth's mouth tightened. "You may want to speak with a lawyer. If this was forged, it's serious." Lena nodded, but her body was already turning cold. The office faded into a gray blur around her. A low ringing filled her ears. Her stomach turned. She stumbled outside into the parking lot, gagging behind a row of hedges. Her body rejected the truth the way it would bad food or poison. They had erased her, not by mistake, not by accident. On purpose. They forged my name. The realization split her open like a wound she hadn't known was there. She drove on autopilot, gravel crunching beneath her tires, her knuckles white around the steering wheel. She didn't remember stopping at her parents' house, but suddenly she was on the porch, fists pounding on the door like something feral had taken over her. It opened slowly. Her mother stood there, not surprised, just resigned, as if this confrontation had been scheduled. Lena held up the mortgage notice like a badge of ruin. "You took me off the house. You forged my name." Her mother's lips thinned. "You weren't contributing anymore." I've been paying bills for years. I co-signed. I gave up everything to stay here and help. You weren't entitled to it just because you stayed. Her mother snapped. You made choices. We all did. Behind her, Aaron leaned against the hallway wall with a crooked smile. You never contributed real money anyway, not where it counted. Her father lingered in the background, silent. He wouldn't look at her. Wouldn't even try. It was the silence that broke her more than the words. She turned and ran stumbling back into her car, slamming the door, barely making it to the end of the block before the sobs overtook her. She pulled over beside a shuttered dry cleaner and screamed until her throat burned. It wasn't just the money. It was everything. Every grocery run, every birthday cake, every sleepless night at her mother's bedside. Every shift she traded, every chance at freedom she let slip through her fingers like sand, thinking she was building something that mattered. It was all a lie. She checked into a motel 2 towns over that smelled like bleach and defeat. The room had 1 lamp, 2 towels, and a sense of emptiness that felt all too familiar. She didn't unpack, didn't shower. She lay on the stiff mattress, shoes still on, staring at the popcorn ceiling and wondering who she even was now. Her phone lit up with texts from coworkers, well-meaning, shallow attempts at support. Let me know if you need anything. Oh my God, that's insane. Your mom did what? But no one offered space. No one offered home. She ate crackers from a vending machine for dinner, brushed her teeth with her finger. Cried so hard her chest ached. By the 3rd day, her savings had taken a hit. The motel bell mocked her from the dresser. Her bank app blinked. With warnings, she thought about calling her ex, thought about asking for a couch. But the idea of explaining what had happened, of saying it out loud, was too much. It made her feel like a child, not a woman nearing 30. She almost didn't notice the photo album until it slid off the bed when she shifted. She'd grabbed it in a daze that night, just one object off her bedroom shelf, thrown into her bag like a lifeline. The cover was worn, the edges fraying. Her mother's handwriting danced in the margins of each page. She flipped through birthdays, holidays, graduations. A record of the girl she used to be. And then there it was. A photo of her, maybe 5 years old, holding a tiny brass key in both hands. Her hair was in ribbons. She was beaming. The caption read, "My girl always responsible." Lena stared at it. It hit her with a stillness more painful than all the shouting. She was responsible. She had always been the one holding things together. She had wiped tears and paid bills and let herself disappear so that others could shine. Didn't cast her aside because she was weak. They did it because she was strong, and they knew she wouldn't fight back, but maybe they were wrong. The thought was soft at first, just a whisper, a flicker, but it burned like a match in the dark, and for the first time in days, Lena sat up straight. They took her house. They took her name. But they didn't take everything, not yet. The highway unraveled beneath Lena's tires like a thread. She was finally willing to follow away from the life that had come undone. She didn't pack much, just clothes, her nursing ID badge, the photo album, and a small tin box where she kept old letters and documents. There was no destination in her GPS, only a direction, away. She drove for hours, passing wheat fields blurred with rain, motels with neon vacancy signs, billboards promising salvation through fast food or Jesus. The road narrowed, then curved along the coast, and something in her chest loosened when she saw the sea wild, infinite and utterly indifferent to everything she'd lost. She landed in a town so small it barely had a post office. It smelled of salt and jasmine, and the buildings were painted in soft pastels, like someone had taken the edge off the world. Above a florist shop with ivy crawling up the shutters. She found a studio apartment, just one window, a creaky bed, and a kitchenette with chipped tile. The landlady, Marjorie, had silver hair in a braid and eyes that seemed to have seen every kind of grief. She didn't ask too many questions. She just handed over the keys and said, "No loud music." And the back door sticks in the summer. That first night, Lena slept without her phone, without expectations, without the constant ghost of who she had been each morning after. She helped Marjorie carry buckets of dahlias to the storefront. The shop smelled of wet soil and lemon tea. Marjorie ran it with a quiet precision, and Lena found herself mimicking that rhythm, trimming stems, sweeping petals, soaking her hands in cold water that felt almost holy. "Why flowers?" she asked one day. Marjorie shrugged. "They don't ask for much. Just light, water, and time. Same as people, really. If we let ourselves grow." It wasn't a lecture, just truth. Lena found a job at the town's small walk-in clinic, patching up sprains and ear infections, sometimes just holding the hands of the lonely. It wasn't the trauma wing she was used to, but the pace was gentle, and the patients called her Nurse Angel with small, unpolished gratitude. In the quiet of her new life, she started writing again. At first it was just phrases, lists, memories that rose like bubbles in still water. Then fuller thoughts, how her mother's perfume used to make her feel safe, how the sound of her father's shoes in the hallway once meant comfort, how slowly those sounds became weapons, until silence was the only protection she knew. She wrote it all without rage, just clarity, and slowly Lena began to feel her edges return. Not the hard edges they'd carved her into, but the soft ones she had smoothed over to survive. She laughed more. She walked barefoot. She looked strangers in the eye again. Marjorie taught her how to bake. One morning, they stood in the sunlit kitchen, elbow deep in dough, flour streaking their arms. Lena's hands were clumsy, unsure. "You have to punch it," Marjorie said, smiling. "That's how it learns to rise." Lena laughed. "Feels violent. It's not. It's necessary." And suddenly, it wasn't just dough. She was remembering every time she had folded herself smaller, every time she had apologized for taking up space, every time she had softened to avoid conflict while others sharpened their words. Like knives, she punched the dough, hard, once, twice. Her breath caught in her chest like something alive. That night, she pulled the tin box from her suitcase, the one she hadn't opened in months, receipts, a locket, a copy of the house deed from the first refinance. Her name printed clearly beneath her father's dot. It stopped her heart for a moment. Co-owner dot. She read it again and again. The document had been notarized, official. Her signature this time was real, tangible. Proof. She stared at it under the yellow light of her desk lamp, a new awareness growing inside her like sapling roots. They didn't just exile her. They erased her to take what she built. But she hadn't vanished. She was still here. She looked around the small studio, the paper flowers she'd made for the windowsill, the loaves of bread cooling on the counter, the watercolors she'd started painting even though she hadn't. Picked up a brush in 10 years. This wasn't a life anyone gave her. She had built it from nothing. From pain and dirt and salt air. She folded the mortgage copy into a new file and labeled it Truth. Lena stood at the window, watching the waves, under a violet sky. Her reflection looked different now. Tired, yes, but there was steel in her spine. Soft steel, bendable, but not breakable. They had made her silent, useful, invisible. But here, with sand between her toes and flour on her apron, Lena realized something more powerful than rage. She hadn't lost everything. She had just begun. The letter began like a whisper, not to them, not to her parents or herself. Her therapist had given her the prompt. Write as though you're reminding your own heart why it still beats. Lena sat at the small desk near her window, a scent of her new perfume curling into the air, something bold, with hints of cedar and peppercorn. Not her mother's soft florals. The scent didn't ask to be liked. It announced its presence and stayed. The pen moved slowly, deliberately. They took my keys, but not my hands. I still build. I still open doors. She stared at the sentence. Her breath slowed. It didn't feel like a battle cry. It felt like a knowing, like the tide retreating before a wave. 2 weeks earlier, she had walked into a legal aid office in the nearby city. She had rehearsed her story 100 times, her documents folded neatly, chronologically, in a manila folder. The attorney was a woman about her age, with tired eyes and a silver ring on her thumb that she twisted when listening. When Lena finished, the woman sat quietly for a beat too long, then said, "You know, this qualifies as fraud, right?" Lena blinked. "Even though it's family?" The attorney's mouth curled slightly, especially because it's family. "Forging a signature to remove you from a mortgage title? That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime." A part of Lena wanted to weep out of validation, out of rage, out of shame that it had taken a stranger in a small office to finally name what had been done to her. The next step was gathering proof. She reached out to Mr. Keating, an old friend of her father's who used to come over during football season. She didn't expect much, just curiosity, maybe closure. But when she asked him about the time around the second refinancing, his face changed. "I thought it was odd," he said slowly. "Your brother brought some papers to a notary I know. Said he was fixing something urgent with the house title. Didn't want anyone else involved." He frowned, like the memory unsettled him now. "Didn't know it meant you were being cut out. That was enough." Another knot in the web. Lena handed the information to her attorney, who began threading the case together like a seamstress repairing torn fabric. Quiet, intentional, powerful, while the case simmered, Lena turned her energy toward her life. She painted her apartment's walls a deep teal, hung shelves, bought a thick rug with wild patterns, and let her bare feet memorize its softness. She cooked for herself, not the way she used to cook for her family, waiting for compliments that never came. Now, she plated her meals with care, savoring them slowly, like she was learning the language of enough. At the clinic, she offered to train the new assistant. She found herself speaking up at staff meetings. Once, a patient with dementia clung to her arm and said, "You've got strong hands, sweetheart. You keep people steady." Lena smiled and realized she didn't flinch at compliments anymore. Her name echoed in that town in new ways now. Not as the invisible daughter. Not as the reliable one who stayed. Just Lena. One morning, she found herself walking through a bookstore downtown. A book of poetry caught her eye. Black cover, gold leaf spine. She bought it and read it that night with a cup of herbal tea. One poem stopped her breath. "Somewhere, someone is forging your silence into a weapon. Speak anyway." The next day, her attorney called. "Lena," she said, voice calm but urgent, "we have a solid claim. We can file to reclaim your equity or even press criminal charges for the forgery. It's your choice." Lena didn't pause. She didn't cry. She looked out her window at the sea beyond the rooftops, where waves folded like breath. "I want my name restored," she said. "I want the truth documented." Not revenge, resolution. There was steel in her voice. A quiet precision. She didn't need rage to make her point. She had facts. She had patience. She had a spine again that night. She opened her journal and wrote a new letter. "Dear Lena, they tried to write you out. They rewrote the story without your name. But ink, real ink, doesn't lie. And you, my love, were always real. They taught you to disappear. Now you learn to take up space. With steady hands." With open doors, she signed it with her full name, Lena. Harper. Her name in ink, her truth finally untangled. Her story hers to keep and hers to write. It was early evening when Lena returned to the house she once called home, the one where love and duty blurred into something sharp-edged and conditional. Pale blue cotton wrapped her frame like still water, calm on the surface but impossible to grasp. Her heels clicked against the driveway, a sound too elegant for a place that once silenced her. Through the windows, she saw the gathering, just a few family friends clustered near the piano, the same one she'd dusted every Sunday while her brother claimed back pain. Laughter murmured through the glass, but it didn't reach anyone's eyes, she could tell. The house had that sheen of forced cheer, like a woman overcompensating with makeup to hide a bruise. She rang the bell. It was her mother who opened the door. A pause. Her mother's perfume still clung to her collar, sweet and cloying. Gardenia, that used to signal comfort. Now it reminded Lena of secrets. "Lena," her mother said, surprise clipped short. "What are you?" "I won't be long," Lena replied. She stepped inside, holding a plain folder in her hands, the documents resting within it like scripture. The room quieted. Her father turned toward her from his chair, half rising, but didn't speak. Her brother stood near the drinks cart, his hand halfway to a decanter, his face draining of color when he saw what she held. Lena offered the folder to her brother. He hesitated, then took it, flipping through with trembling fingers. Restitution claim. Equity restoration. Criminal charges pending investigation. Each line had weight. It was all there, printed and notarized, bound by law and truth. "You're suing your own family?" he asked, trying for outrage, but barely pulling off confusion. "I'm correcting the record," Lena said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You removed my name. You forged my signature. You defaulted on the mortgage I co-signed. I didn't do this to you. I'm just finishing the story you started." Her mother stepped forward, voice trembling. "We were trying to things got hard." "You weren't even..." Lena turned to her. For a moment, she felt the old ache, the need to explain herself, to comfort, but she let the silence hold. "No," she said. "You were trying to erase me?" Her father still said nothing. He just sat down slowly, staring at the carpet like it might give him an answer. For a long time, he'd said little. That was his way. Silent betrayal, masked as neutrality. Lena looked around. The house was still pristine, pillows fluffed, dishes stacked in perfect rows, curtains drawn just enough to catch the light. But it was hollow, like a dollhouse someone forgot to love. She turned toward the door. "Lena, please," her mother called after her. "You don't have to do this." Lena paused in the entryway, one hand on the doorframe. "No, I get to do this." And she left without slamming the door. Weeks passed. The mortgage company reviewed the paperwork, confirming the fraud. Her attorney negotiated a settlement. Her share of the equity restored. Her name cleared. No trial, but justice, at least in part. Lena took a portion of the money and quietly donated it to the women's shelter near her new town. The one where Marjorie volunteered, where girls who looked like her came in with bruises you couldn't always see. Some of them wore their damage like armor. Some wore it like silence. Lena knew both languages. Back in her apartment, she opened the cedar box she'd found in an antique shop weeks earlier. Inside it were just two things: the letter she'd written to herself and a tiny, tarnished house. Key, the one she'd once worn around her neck as a teenager, proud to be trusted. She held the key in her palm for a moment, feeling its shape press into her skin. It wasn't a symbol of home anymore. It was a relic. She placed the key inside the box, closed the lid, and locked it. The final scene was the sea. Lena stood on the edge of the coast, the wind slipping through her hair like fingers that didn't ask for anything. She carried her journal, worn and weathered, filled with truths she didn't have to whisper anymore. She wrote one last page. "I walked away, not to punish them, but to save myself. They taught me how to vanish." Now I teach myself how to stay in my own life, in my own name, with both hands open. She closed the journal. The waves rolled in and out, unchanged, but she was not the same. She walked forward, not away, and didn't look back.